Who is taking her serious? How are you going to contradict yourself literally within a couple of minutes of yourself? And she's supposed to be some great debater and some great, intellectual. Really? Really? All right, now let's go to the point. Now, this is probably one of the greatest debates I think I've witnessed in a long time. Now, this is, of course, Candace Owens, which some people say she's one of the greats. No, she got demolished by Dr. Cornel West. Now, if you don't know Dr. Cornel West, I feel sorry for you. If you do not know Dr. West, he is one of the most, when it comes to debating and intellectually, he's one of the greatest giants living today. And for you to think you can square up toe-to-toe, mano a mano with this man, you done lost your damn mind. And he does it in such a tactical way. He doesn't yell. He doesn't try to do the whole gotcha moments. He does it in such a respectful, finessing way with facts, with bars, with history, with his personality, and just destroys you with grace. He will destroy you and still say, I love you. He will destroy your argument and still say you're a beautiful person. I want to become like that. If I could become half that man, that would be amazing. But let's go ahead and watch this debate.
Well, this trick of using the nice verbiage to make the things sound justified, you see this with Antifa, where they say we're anti-fascist. What, you're against us? All right, you're pro-fascist. Or even with Black Lives Matter, you go, well, I don't think cops are racist. I didn't say that, I said Black Lives Matter. Are you against Black Lives Matter? Well, then you're against Black lives. You're saying they don't matter. Even pro-life and pro-choice play that game. Yeah, you end up being anti-life and anti-choice. And it's rhetoric that's used to trick you.
Well, part of it is, we live in a culture where these categories and labels tend to reduce each and every one of us to just one particular small aspect of who we are as human beings. And so the richness of who we are and the contradictions that we all are, incongruities that we all are, you see. All of us are shot through with all kind of incoherencies. That's what it is to be human.
Yeah.
But you get one label, reduce just one particular aspect, and then you can use that as a weapon to go at folk, you see. And so, the examples that you give, the Me Too movement, it can be reducible in such a way that you end up overlooking the complexity of relationships, but you want respect, accountability, and answerability. Antifa, there's nothing wrong with being anti-fascist. Fascism is an evil, right? We know it's an evil. We all ought to be anti-fascist in a fundamental way.
I think we all are.
Well, no, you got fascists in the world now.
Oh, in the world, in America. Give me an American fascist.
Oh my God, you got neo-Nazi parties of fascists.
But what percentage of the American
population? Oh no, it's small, very, very small, but there's such a thing as fascists in America.
Sure.
And then you got a spectrum, because there's a spiritual fascism inside of all of us, in terms of what Augustine called the libido dominante, which is the lust for domination.
Yeah.
And as a Christian, I could see it inside of myself. I can see it inside of every human being. Sin, a gangster proclivity resides inside of us. That is a kind of spiritual fascism.
Oh, boy.
But political, economic fascism, institutional forms, we don't have a fascist party, but we got people who have deep fascist sensibilities. I'm going at Brother Trump on this in terms of when you actually attempt to engage in forms that are swerving outside of the law or suspending the law or demonizing vulnerable people. Those are quasi-fascist sensibilities. But fascism as a whole ideology, we don't have a wholesale fascist ideological movement, but we've got some elements of it. The Klan had deep fascist sensibility. Would you agree with the Klan was deeply fascist?
Absolutely, and we have to remind ourselves that the Klan, they were Democrats, and I was actually going to make the argument that I see the Democrats actually they have a lot of fascist tendencies. Just in talking about the fact that I cannot go to a college campus and speak about the fact that I'm a black conservative and talk about why I believe in conservatism for black Americans, why I love Dr. Thomas Sowell, why I believe that the economics, a wonderful man.
I think he's wrong on a lot of things, but he's a brilliant man. Go right ahead.
I think he's right, but you can think that, and we can both sit here and we can have this conversation and have an argument, and we do that.
Absolutely.
But the fact that he can go to a college campus and show up and he won't be met with Antifa protesters, right? And people trying to shut down the speech and threaten the event, and the university demanding that you pay for an absurd police presence that no one can really afford to put together. That's how you censor me. That's how you shut me down. So to me, that's institutionalized fascism that we see every day on the left. You will never see that on the right. You'll never see any place that you go as conservative. You will be welcomed. We might say, hey, I disagree with him, but I want to hear his ideas. So I think this dialogue, I think it's important so that people can determine who they actually think is right. If we don't talk, they're not getting a fair determination.
And I resent that isn't accepted as a truth. I mean, the understanding from a lot of, maybe half the country now, is that there's places that Cornel West would go to do a talk, and there'd be Nazis outside Sieg Heiling trying to prevent him. And that's just
absolutely not
true. Those 12 guys are not touring the country trying to stop liberal talks.
But I think one of the reasons is that you don't have a strong right-wing Nazi or right-wing fascist presence inside of the university. The university is very much a place where liberalism is hegemonic. And when you violate certain sensibilities of a variety of different liberals, then they can be intolerant. What you're calling fascist is intolerant. Going against that grain focuses much more on you. Now, you and I share a deep indictment of liberalism and neoliberalism. You do it from the right, mine is from the left. But because my understanding of the severe limitations of liberalism does incorporate certain elements of it, and you don't have strong Nazi presence in the university. You hardly have strong conservative presence in the university.
You don't have a strong Nazi presence anywhere.
Are much more liberal than they are conservative. No, you do. You got it in Idaho,
in a shooting range in Alabama.
Utah. You got some places in the country that have some white supremacist militia and KKK, and you agree that KKK is fascist, right?
Well, I agree with him that I just don't know where it is in this country. So I've been able to travel to 47 countries over the past, 47 states over the past year, and I've not encountered or seen any pockets where I've seen Ku Klux Klan members. Do I believe that racism still exists? Of course, racism still exists. By the way, it's always going to exist. There's always going to be black people that hate white people. There's going to be white people that hate black people.
So she, and this is one of the things, she said, I haven't seen it. Okay. Just because you haven't witnessed something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Okay. If other people say they witnessed it, are you going to believe it? Or are you going to be like, well, I still haven't seen it, so therefore it can't be here? So it's like, that's a weak argument. And two, she literally just said she does believe racism exists. Black people who hate white people who hate black people. Well, where do you think these people live in America? Do you think they're not American if they're racist? Like you can say racism exists, therefore racism has to be in a person. It's not like an energy out there. It's people who, have a perception of other people. These people live in America. And just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, come on, weak argument.
But the question of whether this is some organized cell in our country that has a lot of power, I strongly disagree with that.
Well, I wouldn't say it has a lot of power. I would say it has some presence. I mean, they have empirical investigations, though, my dear sister, where you've got over 600 and some white supremacist militia groups, some of whom have death threats. And the FBI keeps track of them because the FBI infiltrates them.
Where are they?
I don't know where they are because I don't hunt them down.
That should tell you that they're not a presence because we're two black Americans and we're two black Americans. We should.
I mean, the FBI is not going to be lying. I'm not a fan of the FBI.
Well, I'm not a fan of either, but I'm saying is that if this was something that was so obvious two black Americans sitting here, I'd be like, I'll tell you exactly where they are, because I walk down the street over here. They're in Virginia, in this city, in this town.
There's
they meet here on
people who
Sundays.
do.
Every black American that I ask that says there's a Nazi or a KKK presence, you just go, where? They go, I don't know, I read it somewhere. And I think
She said every black American. I literally work with someone who came from Louisiana. And he said there's literally parts as a young, black or brown person, you just do not go. Because you know how these people roll. You do not go down to these parts of Louisiana because they don't want you there. They make it obvious. Do not travel down there by any means necessary. This is what was told to me. So I don't understand what she says. I asked every black American and they say, I don't know. No, come on. These weak arguments.
that is, you are.
Come on, let's be honest.
Hail in liberal land. You are a liberal.
Well, I'm not a liberal now. I'm a leftist.
You're a leftist.
I'm a leftist.
Sorry.
I'm critical, yeah.
What's the difference in your liberal and
the difference is liberalism refuses to engage in a critique of capitalism, refuses to engage in a critique of empire and imperial policies, and it refuses to engage in the milquetoast character of the Democratic Party.
Ooh.
Liberals are in the Democratic Party. I have a critique of the milquetoast character of the Democratic Party.
Okay.
When you talk about the plantation of the Democratic Party, I'm with you wholeheartedly. I've talked about the Obama plantation. We can talk about the Clinton plantation and so forth. Now, I come right back and say, there's a Trump plantation too.
Yep.
All of these politicians, all of these parties have their plantation.
Exactly.
And I'm not a party person in that sense.
I don't tell people that you can go anywhere and hear me speak. There's nowhere where I tell people that they should abandon the Democrat Party and go to the Republican Party.
But you got a critique of the Democratic Party.
Now remember this. She literally just said, I'm not telling people they should lead the Democratic Party. I'm not telling people who they should vote for. I'm not doing that. Come on. I'm not doing that kind of play over here. Listen.
Democratic leadership.
Oh, 100%.
Absolutely.
I do. And Republican leadership as well. I mean, there are people in the Republican Party, I still have absolutely no respect, God bless his soul, for John McCain, the Paul Ryan types. I regularly critique those people too, but it doesn't make the headlines, right? So, I mean, I critique both. What I advocate for is independence. And particularly government independence and shrinking government. I believe in free markets and a limited government structure. That's pretty much what I believe. And yeah, I'm painted as this horrific monster. I mean, you saw it after our debate. Like, we had a debate, and it's like headlines: big explosion. That's not how I felt ending that debate. That's not how you felt. I emailed, tried to get him on the show, but that's what they need. They need to make it seem like we're constantly at war.
Well, you're
now. This is where Candace Owens, in my opinion. This is where it feels like her career, for anyone to literally take her serious as whatever her position is, I don't know. This to me is where that dies. To me, she has no credibility. I can't even believe and take serious any word that she says after this point. Take a listen.
Huge threat to the left.
They sensationalize these kind of things all the time for their own ends, for their own gain. No, but I didn't mean to interrupt. Go right ahead.
No. And I think Candace is a threat to the left because she's bringing blacks to Trump. And without the black vote, the DNC is done forever. Can you maybe explain what Blexit is?
Yeah, so I started the black exit from the Democrat Party we've seen pretty much the same thing. The Democrats, it's undoubtedly have taken advantage of the black vote over the last 6 decades. I mean, that is you cannot question that. And any black person in good conscience that sits down and says that the Democrat Party has not taken advantage of the black vote, in my opinion, is a bad moral character. And you have to watch those bad faith actors. To me, Blexit is about reminding the black community that we are staunchly conservative. We are conservative. You cannot
So she literally just said, I'm not telling black people to lead a Democratic Party and to vote for a particular party. I want them to be independent, especially independent from the government, which I can understand that kind of argument. But then you're going to turn around and say, yeah, but I started a movement called Blexit or Blacksit, whatever it's called, to where black folks to leave the Democratic Party and to understand that they're more conservative with conservative ideas, and maybe they can kind of be more conservative with their, Who is taking her serious? How are you going to contradict yourself literally within a couple of minutes of yourself? And she's supposed to be some great debater and some great, intellectual. Really? Really? I can honestly tell she didn't spend no more than just literally coming up with that just now. Literally just because then she wouldn't have contradicted herself. She would have actually thought about what she's really trying to do, ironed out all the details, and you don't fumble over your ideas. What you're pursuing. You wouldn't cross those avenues. And she literally just crossed that. It's like, my question is, who's taking her serious?
Tether the black community from our faith. I grew up in a very Christian household. You cannot untether the black community, although the government has systemically attempted it, from the family. I grew up and my grandfather was all about the family. These are largely conservative principles now, as you have the left is advocating really for the disruption of family. Men can be women and women should be men, and kids should pick their gender. And if you Google, this is a real thing, if you Google straight couples, all that returns back to you are gay couples, and they say there's something wrong with you if you believe in the nuclear family, and they're trying to grow government, and we've already experimented with that in the black community. We've seen that more government has earned us more heartache over the last 60 years. You can look at any statistic. Illiteracy rates in black America, they're not serving us in terms of the Department of the Education. You know that, I know that. The breakdown of families, single motherhood rate at an all-time high at 74%. You know that, I know that. So how can we stand behind people that are advocating for more government? Handouts, $22 trillion into the welfare system. Black Americans are poorer today than when they started giving out welfare in the beginning.
Listen,
so my perspective is just, we got to try something different, and that something different is getting up off of our own 2 feet, putting our families back together, starting our own businesses, and that is a free market capitalist perspective, which lands me on the side of conservatism.
But you see, exactly, but I think the challenge here is, because both of us share a deep Christian faith. Both of us share a profound commitment to not just our family, but our loved ones. And both of us recognize that when the issues of integrity, honesty, decency, generosity, that just cuts across race, gender, sexual orientation, national identity. Those are just spiritual and moral values.
Exactly.
But I think the deep disagreement is, and I think Charles Murray and others have pointed this out, that the impact of the market on working and poor parents, no matter who they are, has been devastating. When you've had profits quadrupling at the top and you got wage stagnation for 40 years, how are you going to be able to keep your family together when 2 or 3 of you, when you do work, you still live in poverty?
Damn.
This is where wealth inequality comes in.
Ooh.
And see, when you talk about free market capitalism, if we had a free market capitalism, that's one thing. We've got a corporate dominated.
We have crony capitalism.
Exactly. It's crony, it's predatory, 1% at the top, no matter what color they are at the top, even though they're disproportionately vanilla, but we shouldn't have bailed out the banks. We would agree with that. No, absolutely.
We need real capitalism, free market capitalism, not crony capitalism.
Well, I would just say we need a fair society, whatever it takes.
Right. But how do you do that? I don't understand.
He literally just broke that down. He literally said it doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't really matter who you vote for, or not even vote for, but what party you claim to be. If I walk out my house tomorrow and say I'm a Republican, I'm not going to instantly make more money at work. You know what I'm saying? My situation, my gas prices are not going to go down if I say I'm a Republican. No. Democrat, Republican, guess what? We're arguing about a stupid party, and we're both living in the same world, having the same problems. That's all he's trying to say. Being a Christian, that's just not a Republican thing. That's just a spiritual thing. That has nothing to do with party. He's just breaking it down with such a finesse and such a respect. He hasn't raised his voice. He's not trying to do no I got you moments. He is, oh man.
One is you have to have conversations, to be honest, to put a spotlight on what is not talked about. And if you have taboo issues that you're unable to interrogate and question, then you can't have a conversation. And part of the dialogue is we got this little narrow conversation between a Republican Party, most of which is tied to big money. You got a Democratic Party that's tied to big money, but acts like it's in the diversity and so forth. And by diversity, what they mean is symbolic representation of well-to-do black and brown and yellow and women folk at the top, when the vast majority of black people and white and women are catching hell. And they're supposed to live vicariously through the success of these celebrities at the top, you see. And so in that sense, you just have to be honest.
He's right.
It's hard to have a candid conversation about it.
She said it. He's right. She said it. He's right. So why are you gun-ho about a particular party? And just like Dr. Cornel West said, and I do understand, I'm not fully riding Democrat just because I believe in everything that they stand for and this and this. No, I just believe and understand that out of the two parties that we are given, which is unfortunate, that the Democratic Party is at least going to get as close as what I believe what a regular American people need. The Republican Party is not going to even get me anywhere close to that, unfortunately, unless some things change. But as of 2022 in November, it hasn't changed. You know what I'm saying? So come on, just be honest with the conversation.
But part of that's our fault. So I take the perspective, so what I believe in above anything else is personal responsibility. So I don't look externally and say that everything that's happened to black America is not our fault.
I agree.
Right? We have people that, yes,
I agree.
and this has to do with the breakdown of family. When you remove the father from the home, that's why I'm so strong about dads being in the home. Those kids will pursue that paternity elsewhere. So we're seeing black kids turn to the streets. They're turning to Jay-Z, they're turning to hip hop, and they're idolizing these people. And these people are taking them in a direction that's not helpful to them, right? So the majority of we know, for example, California, 75% of black kids can't pass a literacy exam. They can't read a book, right? But if you ask them trivia questions about Jay-Z and Kanye and rappers like T.I. and Killer Mike, they'd be able to come back to you on that.
Or you put them in the studio and their intelligence, and some of them have a genius that's undeniable.
Right. So my thing is that those decisions.
I don't think she understood what he just said. But that's probably not her realm, hip hop. But we'll let that one slide.
Like us taking, welfare incentivize that bad behavior in terms of removing fathers from the home. We have to be smart enough and wise enough to understand that and to turn that down. The answer to all of these problems is not more government solutions. You can't say the government did all of this and now we need more government to correct it. That doesn't make sense. That to me is the definition of insanity. Trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
But part of it is that our precious black brothers and sisters who are poor and working class need exactly what you and I have access to, which is some jobs with a livable wage. They need access to some resources so that their conception of dignity is also tied to responsibility.
Right. But we have to learn.
And that's what we haven't been able to do, for the most part. And even when you generate a lot of jobs, it's not jobs with a living wage. Even when you have access to the housing market, it's hard to get the housing that is adequate, especially given the market taking over, the gentrification that's taking place, people unable to gain access to neighborhoods. See, I grew up in a neighborhood. I didn't grow up in a hood. Now, we were broke as the Ten Commandments financially, but it was still a ghetto. It wasn't a hood. It was a neighborhood. You know Donny Hathaway's Ghetto. When he sings that song, and he and Leroy Hudson wrote the Ghetto, they talking about love, affirmation, as well as poverty, but it was not victim mentality at all. Curtis Mayfield was singing, he's singing about the ghetto in Chicago. He's not singing about a victim mentality at all.
Right.
He's talking about dignity, resilience, and struggle, but you would admit the poverty was overwhelming. That's partly a result of the history of the country. Slavery, Jim Crow, American terrorism, lynching, and so forth, you see. So that the stress on personal responsibility, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
But there has to be some structural realities that allow people to gain access to jobs and health care and resources.
Now, if you missed it, if you're watching this and you missed the knowledge that he just dropped, let me go ahead and bring you to speed. Okay, let me simplify it for you. You can have all the dignity you want. You can pull yourself up by the biggest bootstraps you can find. Okay? that does not mean nothing. If you can't find a job that's paying a livable wage, you can have all the self-worth and all the self-respect and all the whatever Republicans say that you need to be successful. You can have all that. Matter of fact, you can have two of it. Two of everything. If you don't have access to a good education, if you don't have access to affordable health care, if you don't have access to a job that's going to provide enough money for you to live your life and pay your bills without barely making it week to week, working two jobs and still barely making it, your bootstraps don't mean nothing. Your dignity don't mean nothing. You're going to struggle every single week until you die. You're not going to retire. Retirement is not in your future. You're going to die working. If the government doesn't come in and make positive changes to happen, now that's the government's fault for not doing it. But I can't make my job pay a livable wage. They're going to fire me. And I live in an at-will state. So they're going to fire me if I try to make something like that happen. So that's where the government steps in and say, hey, we're changing this, and this, A, B, and C, X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3. And guess what? Now I can afford my health care. Now I have options of jobs that's paying great money. I can get an education to even expand my job pool. I can actually work until I'm like 55 and actually retire at a decent age. Because I've made a lot of money. I'm able to save money. I'm able to pay my bills and change my oil when it needs to be changed. And now I get to retire because I put some money up and and her face looks weird. But none of that can happen if government doesn't step up to the plate. Unfortunately, you don't want big government, but we need government. I don't care how much, I don't care what bootstraps you done threw on. Your bootstraps is not going to make your company pay you enough.
And I completely agree with that. And I think that that's where my limited government perspective comes from. We have to, this is why I support Trump. Peeling back on regulations, I think, is the most important thing that he's done in office. It becomes impossible for an entrepreneur, like I had cousins that live in the projects, who, I want to start a food truck. And then they go and they figure out how they can start a food truck. And there's about 80,000 government regulations and steps preventing them from doing that. So it de-incentivizes them. Now they no longer want to start a food truck. And this is what I love about Trump. So people are caught up in I don't like the way he speaks, I don't like his decorum. I like his policies, I like what he's doing. And so I call myself a Trumplicant. I like Trump. If the Democrats had a candidate that was talking the way that he was talking, then I would vote for that candidate as well. But I think
Bernie
he's the only
Sanders?
person that's sort of disrupting exactly what you're talking about and actually presenting more opportunities. And that's a fact, because now we have the ever in this country lowest ever black unemployment. So you can say it's not enough money to support the households.
We give Trump credit for that.
Right, but you can say there's not enough money to support the households, but that's decisions that are being made. So you're a single mother and you have 3 kids. Well, of course that job is not going to be able to support your household, because there are other decisions that you're doing where it's not meant to support a household. One individual is not meant to raise 3 kids by herself.
Though, and you tell me what you think. One of the contradictions in terms of any support of Trump is he's got a $750 billion military-dominated budget that goes straight to the big marketeers. Both Democratic Party and Republican Party voted for it. That's not limited government.
Ooh.
See, when you expand the military budget,
Bars.
you are expanding government.
Okay, so I would disagree with you.
Government.
So this is when I say limited government, I mean what do you believe is the function of a government?
The function of government is to protect its citizens.
That's the first thing you just said. So that's exactly, I agree with you 100%. So I'm comfortable.
But that means you're not for limited government to the degree to which the military needs to protect us.
No, but that's where I want them to be limited to. I don't want the government trying to raise our children, which is what you and I were talking about off camera when they step into.
So you just want government to not help anybody even if people did do something, you know, that caused hardship on their own life, they don't deserve no help. They're just like, oh, you had 2 kids and you don't have a job to support you and 2 kids. Guess what? Sorry for you. You're done. Too late. You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't have. And now it's too late. You're done. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? Or if circumstances to that person has no control over, something happens to him, you know, some ill treatment that, you know, they just couldn't run from, and they have this crazy medical debt. Is the government supposed to help? But no. Government is only supposed to protect the country, which I agree. But they have to put billions of dollars into that, and that's it. You can't put $1 billion into something else, and no, that's it. Come on. That doesn't even sound like a country that doesn't sound like the number 1 country in the world. That sounds like some, you know, not even third world, like, you know, just some generic place that we haven't even heard of. You know what I'm saying? Like,
they say, now we're going to regulate this, we're going to regulate that. That, to me, is a government that's overstepping. When they're limited to military, that's exactly what we need the government for, to defend and protect.
61 cents of every dollar going to the military-industrial complex, and those oligopolies and monopolies are making billions of dollars, some of it waste. Would you would agree some of it's waste in the military?
Listen, yes. The government, nothing the government does is efficient. I agree.
If we could isolate it to the 750 billion and we were all fighting that the 750 billion was too much, that would be a great place to be.
Right.
But I think we're pissed off about all of this other crap.
But it's all
like
the other
the trans
stuff.
thing is going to be the end of black support for the left.
I mean,
because they're giving hormone blockers to kids.
Our precious trans, it's a small group.
The trans thing is the real issue. The trans thing. Not that our government is being wasteful with not a couple $1,000, not a couple million, billions of dollars. He just wants to sweep that under the rug. But like, yeah, no, it happens. You know, it just happens. But the trans thing is what we really need to focus. Bro, shut up.
No one talks about the West Side Highway.
The West Side Highway?
Well, yeah, where 6 people were killed, 6 or 8 were killed by a jihadist. No one talks about Fort Hood, about the beheading in Oklahoma, about the Orlando shooting at Pulse nightclub, about San Bernardino. We've heard about Heather Heyer literally more than all of those other victims combined. And every time you see these hate groups where they're out there to stop hate and hate watch and SPLC, ADL, it's just skinhead, Nazi. Zero jihadists, zero jihadi training camps.
And quite frankly, I agree with you. And I think that what really, you know, gets really, well, some black people can get very upset with me because I say, you want me to focus on white supremacy when we know that 95% of black Americans that are killed by other black people.
19 a day.
95%. Yeah. So my chances, I should be more afraid sitting next to a black man. All right, then if you're looking at just statistics, people don't like that because that's the truth. They don't like that. Oh no, it feels better. Let's focus on the white supremacy. Let's focus on this area, which basically never happens if you're looking at statistics because you don't want to talk about fixing our communities. And when I spoke at the White House 2 weeks ago, I spoke about Tyshawn Lee.
It does happen.
Yeah, but 95%
disproportionate
every year, of black Americans that are killed in a homicide event are killed by other black people, and that's not even including Hispanics. So maybe another 3% were killed by Hispanics. Who knows? We're talking about a slither of people, black Americans, that are killed by whites in this country annually, and yet the focus on it would make you think it's happening every single day. That's my problem, because you want to know what that says? That says that they're purposely having us focus on things they're never going to fix our community. Okay? If we want to talk about fixing our communities, we got to talk about gang violence, because and I spoke about that at the White House. Tyshawn Lee, a 9-year-old kid who got shot point blank, lured into an alley and shot point blank because of gang violence, because someone had a hit against his father, so they decided to kill his son. The guy was laughing in court. Everybody turns away from it. We're not going to talk about it because, it was happening in our community. Let's instead go out and protest in the strange event that a black American gets shot by a police officer unarmed. And this is the crap that I say. They have you looking at something that's never, ever going to matter, right? That's never going to fix anything, because they know that we're slaughtering ourselves at a faster rate, and that's what they want.
But two things. One is that there is a difference between a policeman who kills a person and a citizen killing another citizen, because the police represent.
True, but they're killing 19 a day.
No.
The blacks
numbers,
are like
absolutely.
10 a year.
And We have to speak the truth.
Yeah,
and so the truth that you talk about in terms of disproportionately black on black violence is something that you have to speak to. But the second point is this, though, that there are a number of folk in the black community who both talk about it and try to organize against the black on black violence.
So why don't they have the platform that these Black Lives Matter groups have?
Well, one is because you got a liberal media that does not want to put a spotlight on black people organizing themselves and dealing with problems inside of the black community.
Because that would help us.
Well, I mean, that's a certain white supremacist sensibility.
Right, and that's what I say, so agree.
Absolutely, but that does not mean, though, that you don't want to keep these police accountable when they shooting these young folk day in and day out.
Accountable. They go
Not
to
day in
jail.
and day
They
out.
lose their
They
pension.
go to jail. You got one going to jail, brother. You got one going to jail out of all these shootings.
Let's correct the record. This is not happening day in, day out. In the year where they made it seem like it was the absolute worst, in 2016, 16 unarmed black men were shot and killed. By rate, more white men were killed by...
It's 1,000
But also
in the country.
unarmed can mean was armed. It can mean trying to kill you with the car.
That's correct. 16, even if we're being generous, 16, you had a higher chance as a black American man of being struck by lightning than you did of being shot unarmed. Okay, white men were killed by police officers at a higher rate, as were Hispanic men. We know none of their names because it was a narrative. It was all about the black vote. They draw up a narrative, they decide who they're going to go after. In 2016, it happened to be police officers. We're going to see who it is in 2020. This is not about helping to save black lives. You can't tell me that you're focusing on 16 lives when a more unsafe place for a black person to be would be in its mother's womb. We're slaughtering our offspring at a way faster rate, and we have more black babies being aborted than born alive in cities like New York. So to me, it's all a farce, and I think it is because the liberal media.
But I mean, you and I are critical of the liberal media, but I think you have to have a bit more open-mindedness at the spectrum and the continuum. We've got statistics on the percentages of black men who will be pulled aside in the car. The percentage of men who, when we went to jail in New York City about 8 years ago here with the stop and frisk, when you had over 90% of the folks stop and frisk were young black brothers and brown brothers.
Those are not
killings. Those are not killings.
Right.
They were disproportionately pulling over whites.
No. Not at all.
As they appeared in the crime stats, yes.
No.
The way blacks and whites appeared in the New York crime stats, they were pulled over less than that. There was more whites pulled over than they appeared in the crime stats.
But you remember the woman who
Bloomberg even considered that.
Who was the judge when she went through all the statistics and said, "My God, under Bloomberg,
yes,
you had
and she was later fired for incompetence."
No.
She was a boob.
Yeah, no.
I'll say something. I'll ask a question.
Sure.
Black Americans, we make up 13% of the population, and we account for over 50% of all the homicides in this country. Is it possible that we're getting arrested more because we're committing more of the crimes?
Oh no! In terms of getting arrested,
I'm talking homicides. 13% of the population.
We're talking about police killing or being pulled over.
Okay, so you're
for driving in the car and so forth. When in terms of the sheer number of homicides, you've got a disproportionate number of poor black people, disproportionately men.
Well, we're disproportionately committing the crimes in this country, all of them across.
No, not all of them. No. Not white collar crime. Not Wall Street crime.
I'm talking about violent crimes.
You're talking about like
white collar crimes.
Yes, absolutely.
You're correct about that.
You're right.
It just sounds like there's a lot of disingenuous agenda.
That's my
with
thing.
the
It's
left.
like just be
and at the
real.
beginning of
But
this,
the
you were
problem
saying,
is, though, you got to have a press that is open enough to deal with all of these issues candidly.
All right, guys. So tell me what you guys think in the comments about this debate. My opinion, she had no real strong argument. She had some good points, which, I think people with common sense would agree on, especially when it comes to black on black crime. That is an issue. And like Dr. Cornel West said, one, police are not civilians. When they put on that badge, they have a higher standard to live by, okay? When it comes to media is not going to show you all the organizations and all the activist groups in these cities, in these communities that are talking about black on black crime. It's not like every single black person doesn't care about black on. That's a disingenuous disconnection right there. You know what I'm saying? So once again, tell me what you guys think in the comments down below.